The city where children stopped playing between 2002 and 2004-85, the streets of Passo Fundo changed. Children stopped playing alone. Parents began walking their kids to the corner. Gates started being locked earlier because something was wrong. Boys were disappearing. And it wasn't 92 to coincidence. It wasn't 92 to running away. It wasn't 92 to childhood adventure. It was someone who walked the same streets, who greeted neighbors, who picked up small masonry jobs, who seemed ordinary, but who hid something dark. His name was Adriano da Silva, and for nearly 2 years, 85, he was invisible. Before Passo Fundo 85, there was Parani 1. In 2001, Adriano had already been sentenced to 27 years for robbery murder. 6 months later, 85, he escaped. He disappeared from the radar. A system failed. And when the system fails, 85 someone pays the price. He crossed the state border, changed his name, introduced himself as Gabriel, used a Brother 92's ID, worked odd jobs, slept in cheap boarding houses. Nothing drew attention. He was just another man trying to survive. But while he survived 85, he watched. The first disappearance was in August 2002. Ederson, 12 years old. He sold raffle tickets to help his soccer school. He left home. He didn't 92 return. His body was found days later. The city went on alert, but no one was talking about a serial killer yet. It was 93, an isolated case. Dusty, it always is. Months later, another boy, then another and another. The ages were similar, between 8 and 14 years old. Working boys, street vendors, shoe shiners, popsicle sellers, children in vulnerable situations. That detail is crucial. He didn't 92 choose randomly. He chose those who were most exposed, more alone, more invisible. The pattern began to emerge. He offered something: money, a job, a large purchase, a simple promise, trust built in minutes. He had social skills. He knew how to talk. He knew how to persuade. He knew how to seem harmless. And that 92's most frightening, because monsters don't 92 wear signs on their foreheads. They smile. By 2003, fear was already palpable. Passo Fundo, Lagoa Vermelha, Soledade, small towns where everyone knows everyone. But no one knew him, because he moved, came and went, worked here, vanished there, slept among the homeless, disappeared for weeks. He was a ghost. Then came a detail that reveals the structural failure. The Parani 1 police had not properly integrated the data into the national system. When he was stopped in Rio Grande do Sul 85, nothing appeared. No alert, no visible warrant. He was a 93 clean 94 man, and that cost time. Time that turned into lives. During that period, he was detained 3 times for minor offenses, for carrying a knife on suspicion. But he was released every time, because officially 85, there was nothing against him there. Meanwhile, families accumulated grief. Bodies were found days later, some hidden, some buried. He concealed them. And concealment means awareness. Whoever hides knows they did something forbidden. That destroys any argument of total insanity. He knew. But the capture didn't come from the police. It came from persistence. One victim, 92's grandfather, grew suspicious, a retired police officer. He put the pieces together, took Adriano to the station, but the system failed again. Nothing showed up. He was released. Days later, 85, another child disappeared, and that one was the last. Daniel, a popsicle vendor. He was lured with the promise of a large purchase. This time, the body was found quickly, and something changed. The press was already following the case. A journalist had a composite sketch. A witness recognized him, and finally, the hunt began. He was found hiding in brushland. He tried to deny it, then confessed. 12 deaths. Then he backtracked, confessed to one, denied the others. But the DNA spoke, the evidence spoke, the locations he indicated spoke. During questioning, he said, "I only felt remorse for the first one." 94 later, according to reports, 93 I wasn't 92 satisfied with the death. I had to do more. That sentence reveals something disturbing. It wasn't 92 impulse. It was compulsion. It was repetition. It was growing need. And that defines serial behavior. The sentence totaled more than 264 years, the longest in the state at the time. But in Brazil, there is a limit to time served. Years, and that reignites debate. Is the punishment enough, or is the system still fragile? But before discussing the sentence A5, we need to discuss something deeper. How does someone spend 2 years committing crimes in sequence, A5, without being identified? Is it police failure, structural failure, social vulnerability, or all of it combined? Let 92s dive into his psychology, into the selection pattern, into the coldness during interrogations, into the debate over diminished responsibility, and into the question that hurts the most. If he had 92 Tutti escaped prison in 2001, how many lives would be here today? 96. The mind that wouldn't 92 to stop. There is a difference between someone who kills, 85, and someone who needs to kill. In Adriano da Silva 92's case, what is most frightening isn't 92T just the number. It 92's the repetition, the short interval between one crime and another, the pattern, the coldness. When he was arrested in his first statement, he confessed to 12 murders, without hesitation, without emotion. Later he backtracked, said he was pressured, that he committed only one. But there is something he couldn't 19T erase. He led police to bodies. He pointed out locations. He described details only the perpetrator would know. That isn't 92T coincidence. It 92's direct linkage. During psychiatric evaluation, he was considered partially criminally responsible, meaning he understood what he was doing. He knew it was wrong, but allegedly had difficulty controlling impulses. That conclusion is delicate because it creates a dangerous debate. How far does impulse go, 85, and where does choice begin? He concealed bodies, changed cities, used a false name, avoided forming fixed ties. These behaviors demonstrate planning, and planning weakens the argument of total lack of control. He didn't 92T act in chaotic frenzy. He acted methodically. The pattern was clear. Boys between 8 and 14 years old, children working on the streets, selling candy, popsicles, raffle tickets, shining shoes. And why does that matter? Because it reveals strategic choice. Children in vulnerable situations are easier to approach, less supervised, more trusting of simple promises. He exploited that fragility. There is also the mobility factor. He committed a crime in one city, vanished, returned weeks later, passed unnoticed. Small towns often do not share information quickly. At the time, data integration between states was flawed, and he exploited that. Another important point, he was approached multiple times, detained for minor offenses, nothing serious, but the system did not connect him to the disappearances. This shows how serial killers often live on the margins of suspicion. They seem ordinary, they work, they talk, they frequent public places. They do not carry the stereotype of a villain. When we talk about criminal psychology, 3 elements frequently appear. 721, capacity for manipulation. 2, lack of empathy. 3, escalation of behavior. Adriano displayed all 3. He convinced. He showed no consistent remorse, and the crimes became increasingly frequent. The phrase attributed to him, 9793I, was a 92 to satisfied with the death. I had to do more. If true, it reveals something profound. Repetition may indicate sensation-seeking. Some experts call this behavioral reinforcement. The act generates a sensation. The sensation loses intensity. The individual repeats it to recover it. That creates a cycle. But that does not eliminate responsibility. It explains the mechanism. It does not absolve. Another disturbing detail, he tried to attribute part of the actions to a 93 entity. Said something took over his body. That narrative is common in cases of extreme severity, but legally it does not hold when there is awareness and concealment. If he takes care not to leave evidence. He knows what he is doing. The partial criminal responsibility report could have reduced his sentence, but the jury rejected it, because understanding what you do is enough to be held accountable for it. And here we enter the issue of punishment. 264 years. But in Brazil, no one serves more than 40. That generates outrage, but also raises constitutional debate. The Constitution prohibits life imprisonment, the system limits, society questions, and the debate continues. But there is something even more important than punishment: prevention, because this case exposes three main failures. 721, failure in initial containment, prison escape. 2, failure in interstate data integration. 3, failure to connect patterns between cities. If any one of these had worked better, 85, perhaps the number of victims would have been lower. The capture only happened because a journalist kept the composite sketch. A witness recognized him. Police reacted quickly after the last victim. In other words, it was a combination of chance, persistence, and public pressure. It wasn't 92T advanced technology. It wasn't DTT2T, an automated system. It was human effort. And maybe that 92's the most frightening part. For 2 years, he lived among everyone, bought food at the same markets, slept on the same streets, went unnoticed, because evil rarely presents itself as a caricature. It blends in. And now 85. Let 92's close this story with the social impact, how Passo Fundo changed, how families rebuilt, and what this case teaches about vigilance, the penal system, and child vulnerability. Because the true legacy of this story, 85 cannot be his name. It must be the memory of the victims. 96. When fear became memory between 2002 and 2004, 85 Passo Fundo did not sleep peacefully. Parents began picking children up from school. Kids stopped selling on the streets. Parks stood empty. Fear changed the routine of an entire city, because when a predator is on the loose, 85 know one feels safe. Adriano 92's arrest brought relief, but it did not bring healing. Because healing takes time, and some wounds never fully close. The victims. 92 families had to relearn how to live, relearn how to enter an empty bedroom, relearn how to face holidays, relearn how to exist without sufficient answers. There is one detail that must be remembered. He was only captured because the last victim was found quickly, because there was recognition, because there was intense mobilization. If the body had taken longer to appear, maybe he would have moved to another city again, maybe the cycle would have continued. That 92's the chilling part. The case revealed serious structural failures. A man sentenced to 27 years who escapes after 6 months, data not integrated into the national system, stops that did not result in cross-checking information. And this forces us to ask, how many others are passing unnoticed today? But this story also shows something important. Technology has evolved. Today, there is a national DNA database. Today, there is greater integration between states. Today, data cross-checking is more efficient. Not perfect, but better than in 2002. And cases like this pushed those changes. There is another lesson. Social vulnerability is a risk factor. Children working alone on the streets, without constant supervision, without a strong protection network. Predators seek fragility, and that demands public policy, preventive education, guidance in schools, community awareness. The memorial built in honor of the victims exists to remember, not to glorify the perpetrator, because the focus must always be the children. Edison. Douglas, Alessandro Volney J, Fanior. Jefferson, Leandro Luciano, Daniel. 9 officially recognized names, 3 still attributed, 9 interrupted stories. The debate over punishment continues. 264 years of sentencing, 40-year maximum limit, possible progression, legal discussion over calculation of benefits. But regardless of calculation, 85, there is a consensus. Society demands constant vigilance because prevention is more powerful than punishment. The phrase he allegedly said 97, 93I only felt remorse for the first one. If true, it reveals what differentiates impulse from pattern. The first is shock. The following ones are repeated choice. And repetition is the signature of serial behavior. Passo Fundo was never the same again, but it was never naif again either. The city learned to be cautious, learned to share information, learned that danger can live next door, and that is harsh, but necessary. Now let me ask you a question. If the prison system had worked, 85, if the database had been integrated. 85, if the first suspicion had been properly checked. 85, how many lives would be here today? That question has no answer, but it must be asked, because every failure ignored today, 85 can become tomorrow 92's headline. This story is not about fear. It 92's about warning. It 92's about not underestimating signs. It 92's about protecting the most vulnerable. It 92's about demanding institutional efficiency. And it 92's about never forgetting the victims' 92 names. If this case moved, you 85 share it, because talking about it keeps the memory alive. Subscribe to the channel, because here we don't 992T turn tragedy into spectacle. We turn it into reflection. And in the next video, 85U92T you'll see another case that proves that sometimes the biggest mistake isn't to see the crime. I've it T2's the system that allows it to be repeated. See you there. And until then, A5 never ignore small signs. They can hide big shadows.